The room went silent at my father's funeral. The smell of lilies hung heavy in the air of the Savannah funeral home as my half-sister Eliza stood up, her designer black dress immaculate, her face twisted with rage. "You don't belong here," she hissed, pointing directly at me. "You were never part of this family." Cousins shifted uncomfortably. Aunt Martha clutched her pearls. My stepmother looked down at her hands, saying nothing, as usual. I almost believed Eliza, almost walked out those doors into the Georgia heat, leaving behind the father I'd barely known, and the inheritance I never expected. But then Mr. Calloway, Dad's lawyer for 30 years, cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, pulling out a weathered folder, "according to Richard's final wishes and this DNA test from 1992, not only does she belong here, she's the only one who truly honored what family meant to him." The gasp that went through that room told me everything. 28 years of lies were about to unravel, and the family that never wanted me was about to learn exactly who Richard Harrington really was. I was raised by my mother, Diane, in a modest apartment on the outskirts of Atlanta. She worked 2 jobs, receptionist by day, waitress by night, to keep us afloat. When I asked about my father, her answers were brief. He has another family, or he made his choice. By the time I was 10, I stopped asking. Richard Harrington, my father, was old money Savannah. His family owned one of the oldest shipping companies in Georgia, dating back to the 1870s. He had married Charlotte, his college sweetheart from Emory University, and they had 2 children, Eliza and James, before I was even born. I learned all this through snippets and whispers. My existence was the result of a brief affair during a rough patch in his marriage. The classic Southern approach: bury the indiscretion, maintain appearances, and above all, protect the family name. When I was 12, Mom received an envelope containing a check for $50,000 and a handwritten note. She never showed me the note, but I saw her cry that night, the only time I'd ever seen her break. The checks came twice a year after that. Never any contact, just money. My 16th birthday marked the first and only time Richard attempted to see me. He showed up unannounced at our apartment, an expensive watch on his wrist and awkwardness in his stance. Mom was working. It was just him and me, 2 strangers connected by blood but nothing else. "Rebecca," he said, standing in our small living room, "I wanted to see how you're doing." I remember how he tried to bridge 16 years of absence with small talk and a gift, a silver locket I later pawned to help pay for community college. He seemed genuinely surprised when I didn't fall to my knees in gratitude. "Do they know about me?" I asked. "Your real family?" His hesitation was answer enough. "It's complicated," he finally said. "Not really," I replied. "You're either ashamed of me or you're not." He left 20 minutes later. I thought that was the end of it. Throughout college, I worked relentlessly, putting myself through a nursing program while Mom battled early-onset dementia. The medical bills decimated what little savings we had. I wrote to Richard once, explaining Mom's condition, asking not for money, but for information about family medical history. The response came from his lawyer: another check, larger this time, and a formal letter stating that Mr. Harrington had fulfilled all legal obligations but wished no further contact. When Mom died 3 years ago, a massive arrangement of white roses arrived at the funeral home. No card, no appearance, just flowers that probably cost more than our monthly rent. I was 27, alone, working night shifts at Grady Memorial Hospital, and trying to pay off student loans when I received news of Richard's grand gesture. A certified letter from Mr. Calloway informed me that Richard had suffered a heart attack and wanted to meet. After all these years, now he wanted connection? Against my better judgment, I agreed to dinner at his Savannah mansion. Charlotte was visiting her sister. Eliza and James were conveniently absent. It was just Richard, visibly aged and diminished, sitting at the head of a table that could seat 20. "I've made mistakes," he said, swirling expensive bourbon in a crystal glass. "I want to make things right." I didn't know then what making things right meant to Richard Harrington. I didn't know about the secret DNA test he'd ordered when I was born, confirming what he already knew. I didn't know about the changes to his will or the journals he'd kept, journals that documented every school play I was in, every academic achievement, details he'd gathered from private investigators over the years. I certainly didn't know that dinner would be the last time I'd see him alive. Richard's funeral was set for a Saturday in early June, when Savannah's heat hangs like a wool blanket and the air smells of jasmine and warm asphalt. I received the news of his death via another formal letter from Mr. Calloway, which included details of the service and a personal note. "Your father specifically requested your presence." I debated not going. What did I owe this man who had kept me a secret for nearly 3 decades? But curiosity won out. That and a nagging feeling that I needed closure. The Harrington family home was exactly what you'd expect, a historic Greek Revival mansion on Forsyth Park, with white columns and sprawling oak trees draped in Spanish moss. I parked my beat-up Honda Civic behind a row of Mercedes and BMWs, feeling immediately out of place. Inside, the house was packed with Savannah's elite. Men in dark suits and women in tasteful black dresses mingled in hushed tones, champagne flutes in hand despite the early hour. This wasn't a funeral, it was a social event. Charlotte spotted me first. She froze mid-conversation, her perfectly coiffed silver hair and strand of pearls completing the picture of Southern matriarch. She recovered quickly, approaching with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Rebecca," she said, her voice honeyed with practiced warmth. "How unexpected." "Mr. Calloway invited me," I replied, watching her smile tighten. "Of course he did," she murmured, then excused herself to check on the arrangements. I found a corner to occupy, watching as family members I'd never met shared stories about a man I barely knew. James, my half-brother, entered with his wife and 2 young children. He looked startlingly like Richard. Same jawline, same confident stride. Unlike Eliza, he acknowledged me with a nod before being swept into conversation with an elderly uncle. "So you actually showed up?" Eliza's voice came from behind me, sharp as broken glass. She looked immaculate in designer black, her blonde hair pulled into a severe chignon. "I thought the check would be enough to keep you away." "What check?" I asked, genuinely confused. Her laugh was brittle. "Please, we all know why you suddenly appeared in Daddy's life. You can drop the act now that he's gone." Before I could respond, Mr. Calloway called everyone to gather for the service. I found a seat in the back row, feeling eyes on me throughout the eulogies. James spoke eloquently about Richard's business acumen and philanthropy. Eliza tearfully described her father's devotion to family traditions, summer houses on Tybee Island, Christmas galas, sailing trips, traditions I'd never been part of. After the service, everyone moved to the grand dining room for the reception. I was about to slip out when Mr. Calloway intercepted me. "Not leaving so soon, I hope," he said kindly. "There are matters to discuss." "I don't belong here," I said quietly. "Richard felt differently," he replied, guiding me toward a seat at the dining table. Charlotte announced that Mr. Calloway would be reading Richard's will immediately, as Richard would have wanted us all together as a family. The emphasis on family wasn't lost on me, nor was the calculating look she shot in my direction. As everyone settled, Eliza deliberately took the seat next to Mr. Calloway, whispering something that made him frown. She then turned to me. "You know," she said, loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "Daddy was not in his right mind these past few months. The medication, the heart condition, it affected his judgment." Murmurs rippled through the room. Charlotte nodded sympathetically. "What exactly are you implying?" I asked, feeling heat rise to my face. "I'm not implying anything," Eliza said sweetly. "I'm stating a fact. Any changes to his will or unusual decisions were made when he wasn't himself." Mr. Calloway cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should proceed." "Before you do," Eliza interrupted, standing dramatically, "I think everyone should know exactly who this woman is and why she's really here." The room quieted. All eyes turned to me, then Eliza, who was now pointing at me with undisguised contempt. "This is Rebecca Miller," she announced, "Daddy's little mistake from 30 years ago. She showed up out of nowhere when she heard he was sick, looking for a payout." She turned to me, eyes glittering with malice. "But you don't belong here. You never did." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt my chest tighten, shame and anger warring within me. I hadn't come for money. I'd come because, despite everything, he was my father too. As Eliza stood triumphant and Charlotte looked on with cool approval, Mr. Calloway slowly opened his briefcase and removed a thick folder, one I'd never seen before. "Actually," he said quietly, "there's something Richard wanted everyone to know." Mr. Calloway's voice cut through the tension like a knife through butter. "Before I read the will, Richard left specific instructions to share something with everyone present." Eliza remained standing, her victory pose faltering slightly. "Whatever it is can wait. We all know Daddy wasn't thinking clearly toward the end." "On the contrary," Mr. Calloway replied, his professional demeanor unruffled but firm. "Richard was perfectly lucid when he updated his will 3 months ago, as confirmed by 2 independent physicians." He opened the folder. "He also instructed me to read this letter first." Charlotte's hand tightened around her wineglass. "Is this really necessary, Herbert? Today of all days?" "I'm afraid Richard was quite insistent." He adjusted his glasses and began to read. "To my family assembled here today. For 30 years, I've lived a life of cowardice masked as propriety. I've allowed wealth and social standing to dictate my actions rather than my conscience. My greatest regret is not acknowledging my daughter Rebecca publicly and giving her the place in our family she deserved from birth." A collective gasp went through the room. I sat frozen, unable to process what I was hearing. Rebecca is not only my biological daughter, as confirmed by DNA testing when she was born, but she has shown more character and integrity than I ever did. While I sent checks from a distance, she worked tirelessly, putting herself through nursing school while caring for her mother during a devastating illness. Eliza's face had drained of color. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "He never even knew her." Mr. Calloway looked up. Actually, he knew quite a lot. He pulled out another document. Richard hired private investigators to keep tabs on Rebecca throughout her life. He has files documenting her academic achievements, her career progress, even her volunteer work after Hurricane Matthew. I felt sick. All those years, he'd been watching from afar, but never reaching out, never being there when it mattered. While I provided Rebecca financial support, Mr. Calloway continued reading, I failed to give her what every child deserves: acknowledgement, presence, and love. Meanwhile, I've watched my acknowledged children take every advantage for granted, expecting wealth without responsibility. James shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Eliza's mouth opened and closed without sound. Particularly disappointing has been Eliza's recent embezzlement from the Harrington Foundation, which she believed I never discovered. The room erupted. Charlotte dropped her glass, red wine spilling across the white tablecloth like blood. "That's a lie!" Eliza shouted, but her face told a different story. Mr. Calloway continued calmly, "The documentation has been forwarded to the Foundation Board, who have agreed to handle it privately if full restitution is made." Eliza collapsed into her chair, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "In light of all this," Mr. Calloway read, "I've amended my will to reflect what should have been true all along. Rebecca Miller is a Harrington in every way that matters, and my estate shall reflect that reality." I stood up, overwhelmed. "I didn't come here for money," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I came because, for better or worse, he was my father. I wanted to say goodbye. That's all." "How convenient," Charlotte said icily. "You show up just in time to collect." "I didn't even know he was changing his will," I shot back. "Unlike some people in this room, I actually earned everything I have." Mr. Calloway cleared his throat. "If I may continue with the actual terms." "No," I interrupted. "I don't need to hear it." I looked around the room at these strangers who shared my blood. "Keep your money. Keep your big house and your family name. I've managed 30 years without it." I turned to leave, but Mr. Calloway called after me. "Rebecca, there's something else. Something Richard wanted you to have regardless of your decision about the inheritance." He handed me a small, worn leather journal. "He kept this since the day you were born." As I took it, a photograph slipped out. Me at my high school graduation, taken from a distance. On the back, in careful handwriting, "Rebecca's graduation. Wish I could tell her how proud I am." I clutched the journal to my chest and walked out, leaving behind the murmuring crowd, Eliza's fury, and Charlotte's calculated stare. In my car, I opened the journal to the first page and read, "Today I met my daughter for the first time. She has my mother's eyes." The week after the funeral was chaos. My phone rang constantly with calls from reporters seeking comments on the Harrington inheritance scandal, lawyers offering to represent me in the upcoming battle, and distant Harrington relatives suddenly interested in reconnecting. I ignored them all, took a week off work, and read my father's journal from cover to cover. 30 years of observations, regrets, and pride documented in his precise handwriting. He'd kept tabs on everything: my first steps, which he'd learned about months later, my science fair victories, my college graduation. There were dried flowers pressed between pages, Rebecca's dance recital bouquet, age 12, and newspaper clippings of community events I'd participated in. Most stunning were entries from when Mom got sick. Diane's condition worsening. Rebecca working double shifts to cover medical bills. Sent additional funds through Calloway. She shouldn't have to bear this alone. He had known. He had cared, in his own inadequate way. Not enough to actually show up, but enough to watch from a distance. It was both comforting and infuriating. On the 8th day, James Harrington appeared at my apartment door. He looked uncomfortable in the modest hallway of my building, but his expression was earnest. "I'm not here to fight you," he said immediately. "I just want to talk." Over coffee at my small kitchen table, James revealed what had happened after I left. Mr. Calloway had finished reading the will. Richard had left 40% of his estate to me, 40% to James, 15% to Charity, and just 5% to Eliza, a symbolic amount that couldn't be contested as disinheritance. Eliza went ballistic, James explained, started screaming about contesting the will, hiring investigators to dig up dirt on you. Mother just sat there, stone-faced. "And you?" I asked. "How do you feel about your half-sister suddenly getting an equal share?" He looked surprised. "Honestly, it feels fair. I've known about you since I was 16. Dad told me after he visited you that time." "You knew?" I was stunned. "All these years?" James nodded. "I wanted to reach out, but Dad insisted it would only make things harder for everyone. I let him convince me, which I'm not proud of." He paused. "But that's not why I'm here." He pulled out a manila envelope. "After you left, Mr. Calloway gave me this for safekeeping. It's documentation of what Dad found out about Eliza's embezzlement. Nearly $2 million funneled from the foundation to cover gambling debts." "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Eliza is trying to paint you as a gold digger who manipulated a dying man," he explained. "She's building a case to contest the will, claiming Dad wasn't of sound mind. This proves who was really manipulating him." "I don't want a legal battle," I said firmly. "I meant what I said at the funeral. I don't need the money." "It's not just about money," James insisted. "It's about respecting Dad's wishes. And," he hesitated, "it's about family. The real kind, not the pretend version we've been living." 2 days later, I met with Mr. Calloway. He wasn't surprised when I said I wanted to redirect most of my inheritance to establish a foundation for caregivers of dementia patients, inspired by my experience with Mom. "Richard would have approved," he said with a sad smile, "though he hoped you might keep the beach house on Tybee Island. He bought it thinking of you." The beach house revelation hit me hard. It was a modest property by Harrington standards, a weathered blue cottage with a wraparound porch facing the Atlantic. Inside, I found a framed photo of Mom and me at the beach when I was about 5, clearly copied from social media. On the back, "They should have had this." Charlotte called a week later, her voice colder than ever. "I understand you're keeping the beach house." "Yes," I said simply. "You should know that our family has summered on Tybee for generations. That house meant something to us." "It means something to me too," I replied, just in a different way. "Well," she said after a pause, "I suppose Richard would be pleased. He always was sentimental about that place." It was as close to acceptance as I would ever get from her. Eliza's attempts to contest the will collapsed when faced with the embezzlement evidence. Rather than face charges, she agreed to repay the foundation and enter treatment for gambling addiction. We haven't spoken since the funeral, and I doubt we ever will. James and his family, however, have become a genuine part of my life. His children call me Aunt Becca, and we meet monthly for Sunday dinners, sometimes at their Savannah mansion, sometimes at my Atlanta apartment, and often at the beach house that has become neutral territory for our complicated family. 6 months after the funeral, I was going through the last box of Richard's personal effects when I found a sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside was a letter written just days before his death. "Rebecca, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I won't ask your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What I did to you and your mother was unforgivable. But I want you to know that not acknowledging you publicly was my greatest failure, not because of what it says about me, but because of what it denied you. You deserved better than a father who sent checks instead of showing up. Despite my absence, you've become everything I could have hoped for in a daughter. The kindness you showed your mother in her illness, your dedication to helping others through your work, these reveal a character far stronger than mine ever was. The beach house is yours because it should have been yours all along. It's where Diane and I met that summer before everything went wrong. Perhaps there you might feel some connection to a history that, while flawed, is still yours. I hope someday you can think of me and feel something other than disappointment or anger. But even if you can't, know that I was always proud to be your father, even if I never earned the right to call myself that. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, P.S. The room went silent at my funeral when your sister said you don't belong, but I made sure the lawyer proved her wrong. It's been 2 years since that day in the funeral home when my life changed forever. The beach house has become my sanctuary, a place where I can hear the Atlantic waves and feel, somehow, closer to both my parents, the mother who sacrificed everything for me, and the father I barely knew. The foundation we established has already helped dozens of families caring for loved ones with dementia. James serves on the board with me, bringing his business expertise to the mission that honors our shared history. As for me, I've learned that family isn't always what we're born into. Sometimes it's what we build from the broken pieces we're given. The Harrington name never defined me, but understanding where I came from has helped me see more clearly where I'm going. I still work as a nurse. Some people are surprised by that, given the inheritance, but healing others has always been my calling. The difference is, I now have resources to help in ways beyond medicine, sometimes paying a patient's bill quietly or ensuring a family has transportation to visit their loved ones. Richard's journal sits on my bedside table. I don't read it every day anymore, but it's there, a reminder that people are more complicated than the worst things they've done or the best things they've accomplished. If there's anything I've learned from this journey, it's that secrets don't protect us. They only delay the inevitable reckoning. The truth always finds its way to the surface, whether in a dramatic reading of a will or in the quiet moments when we finally face ourselves. Whatever family drama you're facing, whatever secrets are buried in your history, remember that you belong to yourself first. And sometimes finding your place means having the courage to stand alone before others make room for you at the table. If my story resonated with you, please subscribe for more real-life journeys of discovery and transformation. Remember, it's never too late to rewrite the ending of your family story.